You're listening to the FM Podcast.
All right, hey everybody, and welcome back to the FM Podcast, episode number 3, with me, your host, Brian Neff. Welcome back, everybody. Like I said, I hope you guys have been good in the last week. I hope you've enjoyed the past 2 podcasts. A lot of work has gone into this stuff, so I appreciate you sticking with us, and I hope that you guys are getting something out of what I got to say. So we're going to try something new this week. We're going to do a little bit less structured notes. The last 2 podcasts have had pretty decently structured notes, and I think that while it hasn't been necessarily a bad thing, I think they've been a little on the short side. So today we're gonna, have a lot less detailed notes, and hopefully that will give us a little bit more freedom to expand on the ideas I'd like to cover. Also, I'd usually do my best work flying by the seat of my pants anyway. So a little freestyle never hurt anybody. Also, we're gonna try and do something a little bit lighter. I've got kind of a story experience for you guys that in the time that it happened, it wasn't exactly the funny thing that it is now, but looking back, it's a pretty funny story. So we're gonna get into that today. So this episode is going to be for those of people who are new to training. A lot of you guys who have found places, have been in the training game for a while. You guys have probably been through something similar to my experience, so this won't be anything new for you. But for those of you guys who are looking for a new place to train, any kind of training, my story today is going to be in the kind of the jiu-jitsu realm, but it'll apply to anything. It can apply to shooting, it can apply to martial arts, it can be a voice instructor, it could be anything, anything at all. So I think everybody will be able to hear the story and take something away. And basically the premise is going to be like, you need to vet the people that you train with. So let's go ahead and get into our little story here. So here I was, freshly graduated from college and looking for gainful employment, and I found myself living in Lubbock, Texas for about 6 months. So about this time, at this point in my life, I started Japanese Jiu-Jitsu when I was in 10 or 11. I wrestled, started when I was 8. I ended up getting my black belts in karate and Japanese style jiu-jitsu shortly after I graduated high school. From there, I went on to do about 4 years of judo / MMA at a judo MMA school. The judo itself was a bit more, I guess, Kozen judo style, so it was a bit more similar to what you would see in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym. And then I ended up making the switch in 2012 to jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu proper. I actually started training at a legit Brazilian jiu-jitsu affiliate academy. From there, after I graduated, I had about a year. At this point in time, the story takes place when I'm here in Lubbock. I had had 4 years of judo, and then I had had a solid year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specific training. I was a blue belt at the time. I think I was maybe a 1-stripe blue belt. Not important. I was a blue belt. So anyway, that's kind of where I was at this point in time. So here I am. I moved now to Lubbock, and I'm looking for a place to train. There was, I believe, 2 schools. I think there was only 2 schools. There was Half Gracie, and there was this other school who, if you live in the Lubbock area, I would feel bad ratting them out, but for those of you guys who know in the area, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. And for those of you who aren't in the Lubbock area, maybe you guys will be able to, guess. I'll give you a hint. He has got a deal with Texas Tech University where students from Texas Tech can sign up to train at his academy as an elective. So we'll just leave it at that. So I went and I trained at the Half Gracie Academy to start, and I checked it out, and having a little bit of experience, I knew that the best way to go about finding a new academy was going to be to test all the ones out. So I went, tried out Half Gracie. It was good. I liked the guys, and then I said, before I commit to any contracts, obviously, or any kind of payments or anything, I want to go check out this other school. And so I did. So I looked up the training schedule for this other academy on Facebook, and they didn't have a class schedule, which was weird. I was sitting there and I couldn't find it. It wasn't on their website. There was really no information other than like contact info. No pricing, no nothing. There was very, very little information. So I called the academy and I said, hey, I'm interested in coming and checking out your school. When do you guys have classes? When would I be able to come and check that out? And the person's response was, well, we don't really take on new students. We work on a referral basis only. And I was like, what does that mean? And for those of you guys who have been in the jiu-jitsu game or any martial arts game, that is a very bizarre thing to say. You work on a referral basis only. So I'm like, what does that mean? And she says, well, unless you know someone who trains here, we don't take new students. And I said, a buddy of mine from high school, he trains there. He did it one time. Does he still train there? And she went and looked up in the computer, and she's like, oh, yeah, he's still here, so that'll work. Yeah, he can count. So I said, okay, great. I'd like to come and check out your academy. And she says, well, you're going to have to sign up for an orientation before you train here, which, again, for my martial arts people, my jiu-jitsu people specifically, is another very bizarre thing to have to show up for some kind of orientation. So I was like, okay, well, whatever I need to do to come check out this school and whatever it takes to train, okay, I'll come to this orientation. I'm like, when is an orientation, or when can I get this thing done? And she says, well, we're having one on Saturday. And I believe I called on Tuesday. I believe I called them on a Tuesday. So it's Tuesday, and I say, okay, sure, I'll come to this thing at, I believe, 10 a.m. on Saturday. And so Tuesday passes. I get a call Wednesday, some kid or a guy or something, and he's like, hey, this is so-and-so from Blanken Academy. Are you still coming to the orientation, right? I was like, yeah, man. I'll be there, Saturday. I'll be there. Cool, man. See you then. Odd. Wednesday passes, Thursday comes. Get another call. Hey, this is so-and-so. We're at the Blank Academy. And I said, hi. What's going on? She's like, well, I just wanted to make sure that you're going to be here on Saturday for the orientation. I was like, yeah, I'll be there, man. Like, what? Like, I'll be there. So she's like, okay, great, sounds good. Friday, another call. Hey, you're still coming tomorrow, right? Yeah, I'll be there. And finally, Saturday morning about 7:30. Hey, you're still coming to the orientation today, right? Yes, I'll be there. It's at 10 o'clock. Make sure you're there at 10 o'clock. I said, I'll be there. I'll be there. So I roll up. I get to this academy. And when I get there, it's about 9:50, 9:55, and there's there must have been their more advanced class going on because it had some color belts and it looked like an open mat. So I roll in, and there's some guys waiting with clipboards, and this one guy walks up to me. He's a black belt, and he starts asking me these questions. He's like, hey, what are your goals, man? Like, do you want to do self-defense? Do you want to get in shape? Blah, blah, blah. What's your martial arts experience? How did you hear about us? The typical gym sign-up kind of spiel, So he takes down all these notes, and I kind of explain what my training had been like before, kind of what my goals are, what I was interested in. And so he gets all the stuff on the clipboard, and I ask him, because he's a black belt. I said, cool, man, you're a black belt. I'm like, how long have you been training? And he's like, about 2 years. What? 2 years? 2 years and you're a black belt? How is that even possible? Red flag number 1. I'm like, dude, BJ Penn took him 3 years to get his, and he was a phenom. Like, he was a once-in-a-generation kind of guy, and you're out here, okay, maybe. So, here, he takes this stuff, he tells me he's a black belt, it took him about 2 years or whatever, and so I'm sitting there waiting for this class to be over, so my quote-unquote orientation can begin. The class goes on for another, like, half hour. It's not till 10:30 that they finally clear the mats, which I thought was funny. I'm like, you guys have called me all week to make sure I show up here at 10 o'clock, and you're going to be late, but, you know, it is what it is. So finally they clear the mat, and the guy who will be running this orientation groups us up, and we go out on the mats. And I'm out, I kid you not, it's me, a 5-year-old, like another 5-year-old, and maybe an 8-year-old, and we're lined up on these mats. So the first of all, I'm kind of like, what is happening? Am I in the kids class? What's going on with this? So they line us up here, and they have some kind of speech or spiel that they say on the wall. It's like written on the wall, and you recite it. I don't know, some taekwondo bullshit. I don't know. So we read this thing, and I'm kind of already like, oh man, I need an exit strategy for this. I don't think this is my jam here. So we finish it, and the instructor guy, who is, I believe, also a black belt, he asks each one of us, and he's like, okay guys, he's like, what's the goal of jiu-jitsu? So he asks the first little 5-year-old, and he's like, hey, what's the goal of jiu-jitsu? To beat people up! And he's like, no. And he asks the other little kid, what's the goal of jiu-jitsu? To become strong! No. And he asks the other kid something, you know, and I don't know. Obviously the answer was incorrect. So he finally gets to me, and he's like, okay man, what's the goal of jiu-jitsu? And I'm like, to become better people. He's like, no. He says the goal of jiu-jitsu is to become a black belt. And it was about this time I realized this is going to be some nonsense, the likes of which I have never seen before in my life. So we go into this class, and the class demonstration, the technique, we were going to get a free technique. And the free technique was a roundhouse punch block into an Ippon Senage hip throw, and that was it. Just basically a basic punch defense. So we sit here and we break this basic thing into about 6 pieces. And so we finally get to the almost throw. So we like break it into, the guy punches me, or actually we had to say stop. So like it was like just ridiculous. It was like, okay, the first step is to say stop. So he broke us to train stop. Good. Okay, say it again. Stop. And the next thing is like stop and duck. Stop and duck. So he breaks this whole process into like, I don't know, 8 steps. So finally we're getting to the step where we're finally going to be able to throw our opponent. And he can tell that I'm getting a little bit annoyed at this point and in the ridiculousness of what is happening right now. And he looks at me, he's like, oh, you probably think that you're too tough to do this. And I was like, I don't even remember what I said. I don't think I really said anything. I just kind of just looked at him, tried to explode his head with my mind. But anyway, so anyway, this class ends after this ridiculous demonstration or this ridiculous orientation, and the black belt guy comes up to me. He's like, hey man, he's like, I'm gonna go ahead and get these kids and their parents signed up and taken care of. He's like, can you just sit here, hang out on this bench real quick, and I'll come get you when I get done with them. And I'm like, alright, sure, that works. So I'm sitting on this bench, and the owner of the academy comes up, the head black belt, And this guy is from West Texas all his life. I mean, maybe he's been to Brazil, but, I'm fairly confident he's never lived in Brazil. But he had this, ridiculous Texas wannabe Portuguese accent. It was not good. It was not good at all. But anyway, he comes up and he sits next to me and he's like, "Oh, hey, you must be Brian." And I said, "Yeah, I'm Brian." He's like, "Oh, my name is Professor..." What are we going to call him? We need a name for this guy. Professor Dipshit. We're going to call him Professor Dipshit. So Professor Dipshit sits next to me. He's like, Hey, Brian, I heard you did a few years of judo. And I said, yeah, I did some judo in college, trained for about 4 years. And he's like, that's cool. He's like, I've been to Japan and I went to the Kodokan and my skills in jiu-jitsu were so good that not a single one of the guys at the Kodokan could throw me. And I'm just like, first of all, why would you say that to anybody at all? Like, did you really come over here to, brag like that? And not only just brag, but brag in a blatantly false way. I'm like, okay, man, obviously you know nothing about the Kodokan, because if you're some random white person who rolls into Japan, into the Kodokan, and asks to train, you're not training with anybody who's any good, You're not. It's not like you're training with Olympians. You're going to train with the casuals, the Snickle Fritz. You're going to be out there. You're not getting Pineapple Express, homeboy. You're getting Snickle Fritz, right? So, cool. Nobody could throw you. Although I'm guessing he probably just jumped guard or some lame, dumb shit like that. But anyway, the fact that he just would even say that in the first place was absolutely ridiculous. But I'm like, alright, cool, man. That's pretty sweet. So then he goes on to tell me, and he's like, I was promoted by Hoist Gracie. I'm actually the highest ranking American black belt. And had I known how the rest of this interaction and the rest of this story was going to go, I would have actually Googled it and shown him proof that he was not the highest ranked American black belt at the time, but I was trying to be nice. I wanted to train, so I'm like, oh man, that's pretty crazy. Good for you, man. So anyway, so this guy comes in, is just a complete asshat to me. Well, not to me. He just makes it just a complete fool of himself. And he finally leaves, and this younger kid comes up. Not younger kid, he's probably 18, 19, 20, something like that. He's like, hey, man, let's get you signed up for these classes. And I'm like, all right, finally, let's get to the brass tacks of this thing. Let's see what the deal is. So, he takes me basically into a private office and starts to use car salesman me with sales tactics and just, I don't know. It was just very sleazy, super sleazy environment. And he comes in and basically he lays out these different training plans, and you can choose this option, and this option is going to cost you this much. Again, here's another weird thing. He wanted a deposit on jiu-jitsu training. I'm like, again, I've never seen that at any academy ever. A $150 jiu-jitsu deposit required before you're even allowed to pay your dues for the month? That's absurd. Nobody would do that. So anyway, I'm looking and he's laying out all these things. There's basically a $150 deposit and then $150 a month to train for two 1-hour classes per week. That's it. You could train for 2 hours per week after giving him $300. So for $300, you were going to get 8 hours of training. Absolutely absurd and ridiculous. Just, I should have walked away at this point, but, again, I wanted to train. So I'm sitting here okay, well, maybe we can talk this price down, maybe we can work something out. So he then informs me that I would be signing up for the beginner's class. And I told him, I was like, well, man, I said, I'm a blue belt already. I already have my blue belt. I've been training for about a year. Plus I have, several years worth of relevant martial arts experience in this kind of arena. I said, I don't really want to go to the beginner's class. I'm like, can I go to the advanced class or intermediate or whatever you have? He's like, no, that's not really how we do things here. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm like, I'm a IBJJF recognized blue belt. Like, that's the organization. That's the governing body, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. How is my blue belt? Why do I got to start over here? I'm like, they were having an introduction or the beginner class as we were doing this, and I pointed out the window. I'm like, okay, so you see these guys over here where he's awarding them a white belt and teaching them how to shrimp? I'm like, is that the class that you want me to go to? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, I can tell you right now, I won't be giving you any money to go to that class. And he's like, oh, well, it's just kind of how things work. And I'm like, you can't work something out? I can't, go to advanced class and see if I can hang, or you won't let me try it out, or anything? He's like, we just really don't really do that here. And I said, so nothing. Because I'm telling you right now, I'm not interested in training here if that's what it's gonna be. I'm like, can you go and ask permission, or can you see if that's possible, or can you do anything? He's like, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll ask Professor Dipshit if we can work something out, or see if that would be an option. And I said, cool. And he just sat there, and I said, well, are you gonna go ask him? And he says, well, I don't know where he is right now. I'm like, well, he just talked to me about 5 minutes ago, so I know he's around here somewhere. Did you want to go look for him, or what did you want to do? What's happening right now? And he goes, well, I'll find him later, or I'll ask him for you later. And I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you what's going on. I'm like, we're not gonna reach any kind of agreement here, and like I said, I don't think this is my place. I don't think this is the place that I really want to train. And then he tried to well, let me go ask, or I'll call you back. And I'm like, man, don't even bother. If you don't want to go ask now, if this is what it's gonna be, if it's gonna be this hard already, and you want these other ridiculous things, I just don't think this is the place that I really want to train. And again, he's like, well, come on, man, you haven't even tried it, and you haven't even blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't need to. I've seen enough. So, I basically leave and I walk out the door. And at the time, I'd been training in Albuquerque before I moved out to Lubbock for the summer. So I called my coach in Albuquerque, and I was like, Kahlo, you have got to hear this ridiculous bullshit. I'm like, have I got a story for you, man? And so we were sitting there talking, and he's like, all right, hey, man, I got to go real quick. And I'm like, all right, cool. So it's been about, 20 minutes since I left the academy, and I get a call from a Lubbock number. And it's one that I haven't saved. I really only know one person that's going to have a Lubbock number at the time. So I'm like, that's weird for a Lubbock area code number to be calling me. So I answer it. Hey, Brian, this is Professor Dipshit over here at Professor Dipshit Martial Arts. And I'm like, hi. Isn't that a little weird, you think, to call me 20 minutes after leaving your academy? I'm like, I hope this is some kind of apology or something, And he's like, well, this is Professor Dipshit, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I just want to let you know that I have the unique ability here in Lubbock to be able to pick who I train with, and I can be selective about my students. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, and I just hung up on him. I'm like, no, man. I was like, no. So I just hung up on him. I'm like, I'm not having this conversation with you. Well, I get a call back, 10 seconds later. Hey, Brian, this is Professor Dipshit over here at Professor Dipshit Martial Arts, and it seems like we got disconnected. And I was like, nope, I hung up on you. And he's like, oh, well, I just wanted to let you know that I just don't think this academy is going to be a good fit for you. And I'm like, no. I don't want, that's okay, man. I'm like, I don't want to train at your academy. I agree, it's not a good fit. And he goes, no, I'm telling you, you're not allowed to train at my academy. And I'm like, well, whatever you want to call it, man. I'm telling you right now that I'm not interested, and if you want to change that to somehow I can't train there, then okay, you do you. No. I'm explaining to you that I just don't want you to train here. I'm like, cool. So I hung up on him again. He called back a third time. And he just, again, just the douchiest stuff. Like, I just want you to understand, like, you can't train him. Like, anyway. So, looking back and hearing different stories and reading some different reviews on Google and talking to other people who have trained there, people who know this guy, he's not legit. And what he's essentially done is been a Taekwondo instructor who I guess at one point got a legit jiu-jitsu black belt, I don't know, but then just completely sold out to the money side of things. He has belts that aren't even in jiu-jitsu. Like, there's like a red belt with a black stripe in it. I'm like, what belt is that? What is that? It's not a real jiu-jitsu belt. Why are you giving that to people? Oh, because you make them pay $100 every time they get promoted. So if you've got 15 belts, that's an extra $1,500 in your pocket. Just sleazy shit like that. And what he's been able to do by the way he runs his academy is he is able to dupe and pull the wool over unsuspecting people's eyes. People who don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, people who are new, people who obviously don't bother to Google search or do any research before they sign up for something or invest money in something, which, that's partially on them. You should wise up and do your research before you commit to stuff. Don't be a dumbass. But, the bigger issue is with him and the environment he's created. And so he has these people who don't know any better. They want to learn a martial art. And he's giving them black belts in 2 years. On what planet? Do you have some crazy system that you're able to teach these soccer moms that you have to be black belts, effective black belts, in 2 years? For those of you who don't know, average time for someone who's training 3 or 4 times a week is going to be between like 8 to 12 years to get a black belt. 8 to 12 years for somebody training 3 to 4 times a week, not twice a week for 1 hour. It's absurd. And so the way he's able to keep these people is he's basically created a little bubble. He's created a little bubble to keep any kind of outside exposure from getting to his students. And the way he does that is by discouraging competition. And I have my own gripes about competition, which I'm sure we'll talk about another time. It's a topic that I could go into for a while, so we'll just put a pin in that for now. But he doesn't allow competition, which I think is important, especially up until purple belt. I think that's super important to develop your game, to see where you're at. It's a key part of what makes jiu-jitsu so effective is competition. So that's one. By not allowing them to compete, they're never going to see somebody who's really been training. They're never going to be able to compare their training against another white belt, right? They're never going to be able to see where they stack up against other people of their same rank, right? They're never going to see. So while he's over here teaching bullshit and these people think they're, a legit blue belt, when in reality, any regular blue belt who's like halfway casual is going to freaking wipe the mat with them. That's not okay. And the other thing he does is he doesn't let external people train there. That's where your referral basis only comes in. That's where your no, you can't go to advanced class comes in. He wants to keep people who have the experience, who are going to expose him. He wants to keep them out of his academy because they're going to fuck up his racket that he's got going on. So how does that apply to everybody and all the training? A lot of people do that. People, when they're new to stuff, they kind of find somebody who claims to be an expert at something, and they just, whether it be naive or just trusting people or whatever, they just kind of trust this person and they go with it, So if I go and I Google, concealed carry instructors or whatever, and I go with the first guy I find on Google, and I don't look at reviews, and I don't bother to shop around, or I don't ask people who have trained, or if I don't ask anybody, I'm going to go there paying for some course, and whatever this guy says, because I don't know anything, that's what I'm going to be. I'm like, whoa, carrying appendix is the worst way to carry. That's so dangerous. It's blah, blah, blah. He's going to tell you all kinds of crazy crap, with anything, you got to make sure that you're vetting people, because the people are out there that are trying to take advantage of you. There are people out there who are just completely full of shit. At least Professor Dipshit over here, I guess, had a legitimate black belt from Hoist Gracie. But there are people, that, take Krav Maga, for example. Krav Maga came over here, and, you have these Taekwondo or karate instructors who see them kicking or punching, or they're like, oh, that just looks like what I do. I know how to punch. I know how to kick. So they would add Krav Maga classes to their list of offered classes at their academy and put it on their signs. I've seen it. Because they think that it's the same, or they know what's going on, and it's not true. They're trying to use that because that's what's popular right now, and hey, I understand the business aspect of it, but at the end of the day, it's lies, and that's not okay. And so we patrons, or us out here looking to train, it's incumbent upon us to vet these people, to look at reviews, to see where these people come from, and really vet our sources. Because guess what? The worst thing that could possibly happen is you pay this person. There's a couple things, One bad thing is that you're giving this guy money to teach you bullshit, I mean, jiu-jitsu is not a cheap hobby. I'll bet you I pay close to 15, maybe it's $1,500 a year that I pay to train jiu-jitsu. It's not cheap, it's anywhere between $100 and $200 a month, depending on where you're at. That's not cheap. That's an investment. So to spend, not only money, but spend time, and then get essentially nothing out of it because this guy's been conning you the whole time, that's sad. That's really sad, and again, realize as well, there are people that are black belts, and just because they're black belts, the way they run their classes isn't going to make you good either. If you're not rolling, if you're not training, or you're not sparring, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because guess what? You might learn the concept of an armbar, but if you can't armbar a resisting opponent, do you really know an armbar? There are blue belts, and then there are blue belts, right? There's an academy around here, it's and we won't mention again the affiliation or anything like that, but their purple belts are not purple belts like our purple belts, and just because you say that you do jiu-jitsu, I mean, you might study jiu-jitsu, but you don't know jiu-jitsu. Knowing jiu-jitsu is being able to apply, is having the technique and being able to apply that. Getting on a soapbox here, but going back, on that same kind of topic is the worst thing that can possibly happen, other than you. The best way that works out is you just waste money, and you just wait, and you just waste your time. The worst case scenario is if you trust your training, like we all should. You trust that you have X, Y, and Z training, that you have these skills that somebody's been feeding and blowing smoke up your ass until you get tested, and guess what? It's not there because you don't have those skills, because you learned bullshit, because you got conned. Then the last thing you ever want to do is put your training to the test when your life or your well-being or the well-being of your family is on the line. And then that's not the time to be finding out like, oh man, maybe I should have trained at that other academy. Then that too late. Then man, you're fucked. You are fucked. So again, it would be really nice if academies, were on the up and up. And these are specific examples, and I want to say they're more exceptions to the rule. I want to say that most academies are honest, and most of them are going to take care of you, and most of them are going to show you and make you a great martial artist. But again, it's incumbent upon you to find the right academy. It's incumbent on you to find the right firearms instructor, the right whatever. Because anybody can can make a company. Anybody can, put an ad on Google. Anybody can say anything, and it's up to us to make sure that what they say is true, because guess what? At the end of the day, we're going to be the ones paying for it if it's not. So I'll go ahead and leave you guys with that. Today looks like the freeform looked a little bit longer. We're about 35 minutes of me talking. So if you're still with us, it's much appreciated. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you got something out of this. So I guess we'll just end it there. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Go out there, do something hard today. Watch out for the crazies. We'll catch you in the next one.
You're listening to the FM Podcast.